A piercing scream cuts through the frigid Detroit morning in 1965, echoing down the gray smoke-choked streets of a working-class neighborhood as Rose O'Connor, a 70-year-old widowed Irish mother, stumbles out of her small brick row house, her frail frame trembling under a threadbare coat. She clutches a crumpled photograph of her late husband, her eyes wild with desperation, muttering incoherently about losing everything as neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering about the crazy old lady who's become a ghost in her own family. That's when Eddie Pop Jackson, a black street artist in his late 40s, notices her. With his easel and paint cans, Eddie channels the pop art movement to transform the grit of everyday struggles into vibrant statements. He decides to expose them not with supernatural punishment, but with the raw power of art and public truth. Though he fears the backlash could silence his own fragile career, he hosts a larger exhibition in a rundown warehouse turned art space, inviting the entire community, factory workers, activists, and even local reporters. There, he unveils a new painting, a stark contrast of Rose, frail and starving in muted grays, against John and Mary, thriving in gaudy yellows with piles of donated goods, the excess mocking the poverty beside it. Hidden in the artwork are subtle jabs at Detroit's own hypocrisy, how it celebrates grit in art but ignores it on the street. The crowd is outraged, turning their backs on the couple, who are left humiliated by their actions. Yet the reaction is mixed. Some whisper that Eddie's overstepped, using a family's shame for his own gain. John and Mary face not just scorn, but the unraveling of their fragile identities. John is the failed provider, Mary is the inadequate nurse. The painting S, contrasting images, Repetros S, frailty versus the couple. Essex driving home the injustice with an uneasy question of who truly bears blame in a broken system. John and Mary's ashamed faces are replicated in darkening shades of blue and black, symbolizing their loss of respect. While the exhibition buzzes with 1960s community vibes, balloons, protest signs, and rock and roll energy, tinged with tension. Art, don't lie, you can't paint over the truth. Face it and make it right, Eddie declares, his voice firm but shadowed by doubt over the cost of his stand. Capturing the soul of Detroit's working class while grappling with his own fight against racial barriers in the art world. John drowns in memories of Rose working endless factory shifts, skipping meals so he could eat, bandaging his scraped knees with tender hands. Yet he also resents how her sacrifices became a silent debt he can never repay, fueling his neglect. Mary grapples with her own bitterness, seeing in Rose the life of servitude she fears for herself, yet slowly recognizing that her anger displaced her own failures onto an innocent little Jimmy with innocent courage. Reminds them of how Grandma always cared for him when they were too busy, his small voice cutting through their defenses with stories of her lullabies and secret candy stashes. Their change isn't instant or complete. It's a messy, reluctant journey. They begin to treat Rose with care, though awkward silences linger. John finds a new job in the growing service sector, swallowing his pride to work under younger bosses, while Mary joins a local women's group, seeking balance between her life and societal expectations, though she struggles with guilt over past harshness. Rose no longer scavenges for scraps. She sits at the table, surrounded by a tentative warmth, sensing the shift but wary of its fragility, her own scars of neglect not easily healed. As a final gesture, Eddie gifts them a pop art masterpiece. The family gathered around a full dinner table repeated in radiant reds, yellows, and greens, a celebration of unity and renewal. Though the colors carry a bittersweet edge, hinting at wounds beneath the surface. The scene is alive with 1960s touches, a black and white TV flickering in the corner, a vintage Ford parked outside, all painted in optimistic hues that don't fully mask the lingering tension. I don't need much, just to see my family together. That's all I ever wanted, Rose says softly, her voice brimming with quiet joy but tinged with a lifetime of unspoken hurt. I'm gonna take care of you, Grandma, just like you took care of me, little Jimmy chirps, his tone full of promise, yet unaware of the deeper fractures he cannot mend. Moved by Rose's weary eyes and the stories they silently tell, he approaches, offering her a loaf of bread and a can of Campbell's soup from his meager lunch. As she hesitantly shares fragments of her life, of sacrifice, loss, and now neglected, he sees not just a broken woman, but a symbol of the unseen labor that built America. He resolves to make her pain visible through his art, hoping to stir a city numbed by its own hardships, though he doubts whether his voice, often dismissed due to his race, can truly shift hearts. The visuals explode with color here. Repetitive images of the bread loaf and soup can glow in reds, yellows, and blues, symbols of kindness, piercing, despair. Eddie's face, repeated in bold black, gold, and crimson, radiates creativity and defiance against a world that marginalizes him. The market backdrop pulses with 1960s Americana Pepsi signs and Chevrolet ads anchoring the scene in its restless era. Mrs. O'Connor, your story is the real America's struggle, sacrifice, and strength, Eddie says warmly, though a flicker of uncertainty lingers in his tone. I'm gonna paint it. make everyone see. Just moments before, a heated argument had erupted inside her son, John's voice thundering. Her daughter-in-law Mary's sharp retorts slicing the arrow for a meager grocery budget that left no room for Rose's needs, layered with subtle references to the commodification of pain in a consumer-driven society. Displayed at a small Detroit gallery, the painting draws attention and donations from a community stirred by guilt and nostalgia for simpler times. Though many offer help more for appearances than genuine care, John and Mary, seeing an opportunity, exploit the goodwill with a calculated facade. They parade Rose at the gallery, pretending to care in public, collecting money in aid, yet hoard it for themselves, leaving Rose as hungry as ever. Their deception, IS&T, just greeted as a desperate grasp at control in a life spiraling downward. Though it festers with self-loathing each time they meet Rose's hollow gaze. John wrestles with memories of his mother's sacrifices, while Mary battles the societal expectation to be the perfect caregiver, resenting Rose for embodying her own trapped existence. The deception is vivid with repetitive images of dollar bills and fake smiles from John and Mary, shimmering in greens and golds, oozing greed laced with inner turmoil. The gallery scene pops with neon lights and rock music posters, a nod to 1960s culture, while Rose's image in the painting repeats in grays, blues, reds, and yellows, each hue reflecting a facet of her silent pain and the public's voyeuristic pity. Thanks for helping out, folks. We're taking good care of Ma, don't you worry? John says with a forced grin, his voice dripping with insincerity, cracking under the weight of his own lie. Now, as she wanders toward the curb, her gaze lost in the factory smog on the horizon, the weight of decades crashes over her. During World War II, she endured grueling shifts, assembling weapons in a factory, her hands scarred from the machinery, sacrificing her health to ensure John had food and a future. Now, frail and weary, she clings to fading memories of a time when her family leaned on her strength, yearning for nothing more than quiet companionship in her final years. Yet, the world has shifted beneath her, and her place in it feels like a shadow. The scene pulses with muted grays and blues in a pop art style, repetitive images of Ford cars rolling off assembly lines, symbolizing the relentless grind of industrial life. Bright red Coca-Cola signs and the faint croon of Elvis Presley from a nearby radio pierce the frame, a jarring contrast to Rose's dimming spirit. Back in the war days, I worked till my hands bled to keep Johnny fed, Rose murmurs in a slow, nostalgic whisper, her voice cracking with raw pain. Now, I just sit here, watching the world move on without me. John, now 38, trudges home from the Ford plant, his face carved with worry after overhearing whispers of layoffs amid the auto industry's decline. Yes, not just fighting for a paycheck, but wrestling with the shame of failing as a provider, a role drilled into him by a generation that prized stoic masculinity. His wife Mary, 35, scrubs the kitchen counter with a tense jaw, her mind churning over unpaid bills and the seductive whispers of women's liberation. She hears on the radio ideas that clash with her ingrained duty as a housewife. Their struggles breed resentment, and Rose, once their rock, becomes a silent burden in their eyes. They cut back on her meals, justifying it with cold pragmatism. Everyone's got to sacrifice in tough times, but beneath their words lies a deeper fracture. John's guilt for betraying the mother who raised him alone, and Mary's frustration at a life that offers no escape from domestic chains, projecting her anger onto Rose. Rose, sensing their strain, buries her hunger, slipping out under the guise of errands to scavenge empty Coca-Cola cans and bottles, selling them for pennies to buy stale bread. She hides her pain, fearing she only widened the rift. Little Jimmy, their 10-year-old son and Rose's grandson, watches his grandmother's frame shrink. Her steps falter, torn between a child's love for her stories of old Ireland and the fear of his parents' sharp tempers if he speaks up. The scene is raw, with repetitive images of empty soda cans in dull grays and blacks cluttering the frame, symbolizing poverty, yet edged with a faint red glow of lingering hope. The family dinner table reveals plates brimming with food for John and Mary in vivid yellows and reds, while Rose's holds mere crumbs, painted in cold gray and repeated thrice to underscore the quiet cruelty. Where Barry Mackinnon's meet. Ma, you gotta eat less till things get better, Mary snaps, her voice sharp but brittle with unspoken stress. I've gone hungry before. I'll do it again if it helps my family. Rose whispers to herself, her tone heavy with a resignation that masks her breaking heart. One chilly afternoon, as autumn leaves swirl and the Detroit wind, Rose sits on the curb near a bustling market, picking through trash for scraps of bread. Her dignity, a distant memory. Eddie pours his soul into a striking pop art piece of Rose, depicting her hunched on the curb surrounded by soup cans and cars, a tribute to her unseen labor and suffering. Eddie uncovers John and Mary's duplicity through whispers in the community and the unchanged wariness in Rose's eyes when he visits. Shamed by the community's scorn, John and Mary are forced to confront their guilt, but it's not a simple epiphany.